Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Lovely to have you and lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Um,
Nice to be here.
yeah, I wanted to basically start off with like your journey and jump literally straight in with kind of getting into VFX and how like what that journey is like because I feel like that journey is kind of unknown for a lot of people of how to actually just dive in and get into it. So, yeah, how did you Ooh, buffering slightly?
Oh, we're back. Sorry. Can you
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. I did
So,
hear that. I started off when I was a teenager, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and the people that I used to watch, the like creators like Freddie Wong and Corridor Digital, Film Riot, they all used to make short films, and then they would do like a breakdown afterwards of how they did it, and I found it really exciting and interesting. So I naturally just started mucking about and like showing an interest in VFX through that, and here we are, 10 years later. It's manifested into a career.
I was gonna say because I feel like at that time that was like a really big thing, especially the I forgot the guy's name, the one who was doing a lot of the gun stuff on like YouTube and stuff like that.
That was
I
Freddie
completely
Wong, I think.
That's it, Freddie Wong. He was like big at that time, and he was like putting a lot of people on. So it's actually funny that you mentioned that era. So then if we sort of like sort of in between, watching the videos and then sort of like getting into with coffee and TV, what was
Mhm.
the kind of pivotal moment for you when you were like, oh, I can actually do this as a career and actually this is a thing?
It's probably when I started college, I think. Until college, I hadn't studied anything. I hadn't had any formal training. And I went to college, and my initial plan was to do academic subjects. So I was going to do, I think, history, IT, German, and I would do film studies as like my passion subject. And then when I got to college, the college teachers on the open day said, we actually do this BTEC called Creative Media Production, which is like three A levels, and all you do instead of doing other academic subjects is just do like making videos and stuff and learning how to use cameras and edit. So that I put all my eggs in one basket. I did that and games design, where I learned to use Blender, which is a 3D software. And I spent 2 years, and I already leading up to that, I'd done a bit of work with a local production company called Offshoot Films, who are a charity that do a lot of work with young people. I started off just doing workshops with them as someone attending the workshops, and then towards the end of my teenage years, I actually started working for them as a teacher at
Oh wow.
workshops and stuff they would do, and I also worked for them a bit as a freelance cameraman and editor. So by the time I got to college, I already knew how to edit and use a camera and stuff, and I was a bit well versed in filmmaking techniques. So I spent the whole 2 years at college not doing a huge amount of the actual curriculum work, but instead just making fun YouTube videos with my friends and mucking about and just experimenting, really. And that 2 years was a great period of time to really try different things and just muck about with social media. Gained a little bit of a following and some traction from that. And then at the end of it, when I was looking for a job, instead of going to university, I wanted to do an apprenticeship because I felt like university wasn't really the best route for me because I already knew how to do quite a lot of stuff they would teach me
Mm.
anyway. And I got an apprenticeship working in visual effects at a company called The Mill, which at the time was one of the biggest visual effects companies in the world.
Oh wow.
And that was how. So that was when I transitioned from just being interested in it to actually going into a career.
Okay, so then in terms of, so I feel like what I'm gathering is like a lot of it was a lot of, I guess, self-starting and also self-belief, which I feel like is key if you're going into like a creative field, especially like with VFX, because there's no kind of, I guess, clear career structure, or if you disagree, but there's no kind of this is what you do and this is where you go and this is the steps you should take. So it kind of sounds like to me it's like a lot of your journey was self-determination and it was kind of like I'm interested in this thing, I'm interested in this area, I'm going to go in this route. I know there's a traditional route, but I'm actually going this other, basically self-belief essentially.
Definitely, yeah. Like when it sounds from the way that I've described it, like I just left college and went straight into a VFX job. But actually, I had no idea how to transition from being a college student with no proper like industry experience to going and working at a visual effects company. The traditional route, like most of my friends did, was go to university. You would study for 3 or 4 years, get a degree, and then probably leave and become a runner, which is the most common route into the
Mm.
industry. Unfortunately, the time, well, thankfully, I really dodged a bullet because the time when I would have graduated was actually the peak of the pandemic. And a lot of my
Mm.
friends that went to university struggled for a long time after that to get jobs because there was a shortage of work in the film industry. So that was actually very fortunate timing for me that I decided not to go down that route as well. But in terms of stuff that I was applying for, I knew visual effects was the end goal, but I didn't really know how to get there. So I just applied for stuff that was generally to do with filmmaking. I applied to be a social media content creator for an electric car company, just be like managing their social media and shooting reels and stuff for them. I applied to be a production assistant at the BBC. It was basically anything to do with media and filmmaking I was interested in, and then I would sort of work my way towards visual effects somehow, and that was my plan. And then I just stumbled across an apprenticeship that was literally going straight in and working at a visual effects company, and it came at the perfect time. They'd only been running it for 1 year before I signed up for the scheme, and it was just an absolute blessing. And I credit a lot of the success that I've had since in terms of where I've got to that opportunity to go in and just start straight away as a visual effects artist.
No, that's amazing because it honestly really does speak to that kind of like I'm going to continue no matter what, because you're just basically spreading the spread-based betting where you're kind of just any situation that's related to the field, let's just get in there because we never know where it's going to end up, and I think that's great. Um, in terms of, I guess, like your transition from then to now, like what's been the biggest kind of like, I guess, realization in your sort of VFX career, and I guess change in the way that you work, like, and that could be from how long it takes you to do a shot, or even just like just any kind of practices that where you know it's sort of really shifted and it's really kind of opened your eyes.
I suppose that the biggest change is in probably my day-to-day work. So when I started, obviously I was a junior artist and I would be compositing. So that was my main role. I was a compositor, and I still am to a degree. And then a few years ago, I became a lead artist, which means you're kind of supervising a team and delegating, and you're holding the edit and sort of shuffling shots around between people. And now I work as a visual effects supervisor as of a few months ago, which means you're the person that goes on set and you're kind of the link between the production company, or sorry, the post house and the shoot. So I still do compositing, but I guess the main difference is that I spend a lot less time doing like the trench work, like actually on
Mhm.
shots and working on the box. And now my role is a lot more. I don't like to think of myself as a manager, but it is kind of, I'm keeping the plates spinning, making sure everyone's
Mhm.
busy. I do a lot of the calls with the clients and stuff now, which is something that you're not quite as exposed to when you're more of a junior artist. And obviously, going on the shoots isn't something that I was doing until fairly recently. So that's been the biggest shift, really, is what my day looks like. And I still do a lot of compositing now, but my week can be totally different from day to day. Whereas it used to be Monday to Friday was just doing shots.
I want to dive more into what you were talking about in terms of just like the process of being on set. So, can you give me a picture of what that's like, and kind of your relationship with being on set, of what that is, what are you doing on set that means that it affects the end product.
Yeah, of course. So, a visual effects supervisor, I always describe it as being like damage control on a shoot. So, you're basically there to oversee how things are approached and talk about methodologies and stuff. A lot of the conversations happen ahead of the time. So, when a job is awarded, you'll often have discussions weeks in advance of the shoot about approaches to shots, especially if there's some complicated stuff. You have to work out what equipment we're going to need. Do we have to do multiple plates? It depends, obviously, a lot on what's going on in the shot. And then as you get closer and closer, there'll be a pre-production meeting, usually a couple of days before the shoot, actually on location, where everyone, like the producers and the director and production company and visual effects supervisor and stuff, sit down in some sort of meeting room, go over the script and get like the last minute wardrobe and stuff approved. That's usually quite a long meeting. And then, yeah, once you're actually on set, a lot of it is just making sure that things are filmed in a way and done in a way that's not going to have a negative impact on the post production. So again, it kind of varies a lot depending on what's going on, but it can be things like making sure that green screens are set up correctly, putting tracking
Mm.
markers down. There's also a lot of data collection that comes with visual effects supervising. So the role is to go back with all of the data on set. So that can be just simple things like taking note of the lens that was used, camera data, and then there's a lot of stuff like taking measurements on set if you're going to be adding CG objects in to have a reference of scale. Lots of notes on what's going on, lots of reference photos. It's just basically capturing as much as you can so that when you come back to do the post later and you're rebuilding things or whatever it might be, you have all the information that you need and you can give everyone the context
Mm.
they need to do their job properly.
What I want to say to that is I think because there's so much that's involved with, I guess, the set process and then also the post process. What I want to ask you is what is the best time? This is where we're moving more into like the director kind of like relationship with the VFX supervisor.
Mhm.
Um, when is the best time for a director or for, I guess, a production company, however it works? And you can kind of give me an insight on that, to get in contact with the VFX team, because I think a lot. I'm assuming, and I've heard whispers of there's a lot of situations where it's a last minute job, but obviously I'm guessing the earlier the better. But what's your thoughts on that?
Exactly. Yeah, as you say, the earlier the better, really, because it just gives you more time to discuss approaches and how you want to do things. And the directors usually have a certain idea for how they want to do stuff that's not necessarily communicated completely in the storyboards. So usually we don't really have much contact with the director until the job is actually awarded, and then we'll be put in touch with them and usually have a call after that to go over like initial thoughts. And then there'll be some more meetings and emails and stuff that go back and forth leading up to the shoot. But yeah, it's really just a case of the longer you have to chat with them, especially if it's a complicated scene or whatever it is that you're approaching, more planning is always going to result in a better outcome.
I mean, I guess it's like how long is a piece of
Piece
string,
of
because
string.
obviously depending on which what you're trying to do. But in that same vein, like what are some practices that I guess directors can do now to kind of like better integrate? Because there are going to be times when, for example, a director will be like, we weren't planning on VFX, but we now need VFX because a mistake has happened. Like, I
Yeah.
guess what's something that can be kind of embedded in the production process, for directors, that can make it sort of optionally VFX friendly? That's a very specific question, but
No,
but
it's
in the
okay.
cases of, yeah.
I think being very open and communicating is very important. And also, if there's potential for VFX, you need to allow time for, like I was saying, the proper data to be captured. So the shoots are very busy. Time is money. You know, when people are standing around not doing anything, you're literally burning time, and there's only so many hours in the day. Then you have to start paying overtime and extra rates and stuff, and it gets very complicated. So anytime that I'm wandering around with a color chart and a chrome ball around the set for 5 minutes and no one else can really do anything is not ideal for everybody else. But it's important in terms of us being able to do what we need to do later on in the process. So I suppose if there was a chance that visual effects was going to be needed, then just allowing the time for whoever's on the shoot supervising it to get what they need to make it a smoother process in the end.
Okay. What does the relationship look like, like on a day-to-day basis with the director, like while you're working on the sequence? So say for example, you've got the project, you've won the project through, and they've said, okay, like if you talk me through, you've had that call, they're saying, okay, we want bubbles happening here. Are they sat with you like a color grade, or is it more kind of like a send back, here's the reference, do you know what I mean? What does it look like?
It varies massively. I'd say every project is different. There's a few factors that go into it. How busy the director is usually a big one. So quite often they'll be across 3 or 4 projects at a time, and one will be like their baby, and the rest of them are kind of like keeping the lights on jobs that they're a little bit
Mm.
less interested in. So it kind of depends whether the one that you're doing is the one that they're super into, and then they'll be quite present, or they might be a little bit more removed from the process, and you'll just sort of talk to them through a producer a lot of the time if they're busy doing other stuff. The other thing, I guess, would be geographical location. So we do a lot of stuff with people in the States now. So obviously there's a time zone difference. With UK directors, quite often we have them come into the studio and they sit with us and we do reviews. It can be a few times a week, or it can be, once a fortnight, depending on people's availability. But that's my preference because you have that kind of like face-to-face interaction, and it's better for building relationships and stuff. But we certainly do lots of calls over Teams and things as well, and do like remote reviews and feedback sessions and dailies and stuff. So yeah, it makes a massive difference depending on the scale of the project and the director's availability and where they are. That can have a huge impact on how much we see them.
I want to touch on that as well, and this is more of a cheekier question, but what makes a good director to work with? So in that process, in that
uh,
process, like yeah, like, what makes a good director to work with, and what makes the process easier? I guess obviously always more time, but yeah.
for me, the shoots that I've done that I've enjoyed the most are the shoots where the directors are reasonably post savvy, meaning they don't have to be a visual effects artist, but they understand a bit of the process in terms of like, okay, we need to shoot 2 plates for this because we're doing a split screen or whatever. A lot of directors understand the general concepts, but they don't really have an idea of how stuff works. And sometimes that can
Mm.
lead to quite tricky situations where they think things might be easier than they actually are. And then when you have to put your foot down and say, actually, that's quite tricky, they sometimes get a little bit annoyed because they feel like you're being unreasonable. But that, again, that's just part of the battle of being a visual effects supervisor. It's kind of diplomatically having those conversations. And you can always kind of delegate to a producer as well to put the foot down and have those conversations separately, so it's not happening on set and in front of everyone and wasting people's time. But yeah, someone that understands the process, and some directors that I've worked with actually do visual effects in their spare time, and those opportunities are amazing, and it's great to work with them because they have such an intricate understanding of what you're doing that they can actually, talk in the same kind of language and have technical conversations about what they want. It can be a lot harder when directors just talk quite ambiguously if they're
Mm.
trying to describe what they're after, but they don't really know the terminology. They're just sort of saying like, "Oh, just make it more like," and they're just using like textural terms, and then
Yeah.
you kind of have to work out what they're inferring and be like, "Is this what you mean?" But yeah, it really helps if they have a good understanding of the process.
So note to any directors watching, know what you're talking about, do your research, and I guess also there's an element of kind of play beforehand before you're talking to the person that's going to make your vision come true, because if you can't articulate what you're saying, then nobody else is going to be able to convert what you're saying into a reality. So
Yeah, exactly. A
yeah.
really good example of this is Gareth Edwards, who directed The Creator recently, got his start in visual effects. And so he was directing it from the approach of like he understood how to do everything. And they cut a load of stuff out that they didn't need to do, and that the process was much more streamlined. They just had a skeleton crew. A lot of the time they were filming on location in places like Vietnam, in remote fishing villages. And his intricate understanding of the process meant that they could shoot things in a way that was much more cost effective and
Mm.
get still an absolutely incredible result because he knows the corners that you can cut and the things that necessarily don't need to be done to such extent on set to really slim things down and get the most out of the production.
No, and I feel exactly the same way, because also I think directors that have that understanding just can see things in such a simplistic way that as you've said, that you don't have to do the extra mile round. You can just go straight into it. In terms of I want to talk a bit about that sort of exploration as well, because you were talking a bit about before you were doing more sort of like the logging and the sort of the setup work. But as a supervisor, how much, like, I guess, time do you get, or how much, what's the relationship with sort of like testing and then kind of your sort of artistic expression in the VFX process? Like, are you working sort of made to order, or is it more kind of, is there freedom and is there room for, I guess, the VFX artist to explore and kind of try different things?
There's usually a little bit of back and forth. Again, it's very project dependent. If you're making something that's quite a black and white brief, there's not really much point in being like, oh, we think we could try this because, like, for example, if you're doing a CG car, there's no artistic interpretation. It's like it just needs to look like a car.
Mm.
Whereas if you're doing something a bit more abstract, that's not something that people have seen all the time, there's not really a way to approach it that's like an out of the box solution. So in that
Mm.
situation, you're kind of like, you go forward and present some of your ideas that you think would work well, and the creative directors and stuff on the job will kind of give their input as well. The director will obviously have a say, an enormous say, and the clients also have a big decision because they're paying for it. And so really it's between sort of the senior artist on the job, the director, and the clients. That's like the trifecta of decision making that goes into a lot of the more creative approaches to
Okay.
VFX shots.
Interesting. I want to jump. Well, I also want to mention to anyone watching, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, because now is the time. Because we've actually, I've got a few more questions, but I just want to make sure that anyone who's like watching, is any burning questions that you have, now is the time, because we've got Alfie here who can answer directly. If you're working on a production, you're like, I have no idea how to do this. I have no idea how to contact this person. Yeah. Um, if so, I want to jump straight back to, not straight back, but a bit before.
Mhm.
A little bit about kind of like, if you're trying to get into VFX, or maybe trying to work with a company like Coffee and TV now, what does that look like? Because I feel like I don't want to mention AI, because that's a whole other that's a whole other different topic
Dodgy
and different
topic.
feelings. But what would someone do today that are like, hey, I want to be a compositor, I want to be a VFX artist, where should they start? Because obviously, as you mentioned, your structure was a bit kind of, it was very self-led. Is that the reality, or is there any advice that you would give to anyone coming up now that's like, okay, these are the pitfalls I experienced. This is where how I would do it now.
Yeah, of course. I think going to university seems to be much more of an optional phase than it used to be. Like even 5, 6 years ago, it was much more like that was really the only way in, unless you got very lucky or you knew somebody that worked at the visual effects at a visual effects studio that could get your foot in the door somehow. I'm involved, or like have been involved over the last few years, in a bit of the recruiting process and sort of reviewing people's reels and stuff. And a lot of the time now, something that we really look for that makes people stand out is actually having quite an interesting social media account. So people, like for example, if you want to be a designer or something, if you've got a really quirky design account that you post loads of work on, and it's got some really good portfolio pieces, that can really make you stand out as someone that's very clearly doing a lot of this already in your spare time. And it shows like a passion for it, and you're really willing to put in the effort, and also that you're learning all the time and improving in your free time essentially. Um, Having a really good reel is important, especially for visual effects artists. Like if you're, say, doing what I do, and becoming a compositor, having a reel that showcases the various different aspects of our job, that whether that might be keying and cleanup or like CG compositing. There's various strings to a compositing bow. Being able to showcase that you can do all of those things is really important as well. So I think, yeah, the two main ones are probably strong reel and potentially having a cool social media account. And then also just a lot of it is just personality based, especially if you're going in as a
Mm.
junior. All the skills are things that you will kind of learn on the job anyway, to a degree, especially going in from the start. If you're going in as an apprentice, for example, I had never touched Nuke before I became a compositor. I used other software a bit, but I was still very much an amateur. And a lot of the reason I got hired was just on the fact that I came across well. I was, I could have a conversation, and even though I was a bit younger than everyone else that was interviewing, I think I kind of held my own in terms of my social skills and being able to just have a laugh and things on the day. And I think that communicated the fact that I would be quite a fun person to work with, and wouldn't have
Mm.
any issues with like communicating in a team and stuff later down the line. So a lot of the hiring process is also just about personality. It can be quite difficult if you're introverted to come across well, but I think it's a really important thing, particularly in interview situations, to kind of project a little bit of confidence and show that you know what you're talking about.
No, I think you're so right, because I think what people don't talk about enough is that this business, like the film business, is very social. Like
Oh yeah,
most
100%.
of it. It's most of it, and it's like it's mostly relationships, and people just want to get someone in that they can work with, because you're going to be working together for quite a long time and in close
Yeah,
quarters. So it's
exactly.
like you need to get on. So, but I also think like speaking to strangers, like just speaking, people need to know what you do and what you want to do so that they can kind of be like, okay, you might be great here, or we'll take you on. Because I'm guessing in your environment, well, not in your environment, but in your story, what I noticed is like it was a lot of you putting yourself in uncomfortable or unfamiliar environments where you're like, I have no idea how to do this, or I don't know anyone here, but this is what I want to do. So that's kind of the reality of it.
Yeah, exactly. And later down the line as well, like we were saying, if you're in a room with a director, you need to be able to have a conversation and articulate what you want to say and communicate effectively. Otherwise, it's going to end up in quite an awkward situation.
Yeah. On that topic, I want to, what's some advice that you'd give? And also, I want to sort of package this as two things: is like maybe not pet peeves, but maybe home practices that
Okay.
you think that sort of like upcoming VFX artists should kind of like consistently practice, and any advice anyone of to anyone getting into it now.
Yeah, of course. I think being motivated is probably one of the most important things, and it's what really paid off for me, certainly in the early years. Uh, Showing and demonstrating that you're willing to go the extra mile and put in the spade work, not just at work, but also in your own time in terms of developing your skills. When I was a junior, for the first 11 months, I was commuting into London. So before I actually moved to be a bit closer to work, I had an hour and a half train journey each way at the start and end of the day. And to make use of the time most effectively, I would watch nuke training videos and like
Oh
visual
wow.
effects theory videos and stuff about color spaces and all that jazz on the train home. There's a really good photo on my Instagram. You scroll a while back of me sat next to a bin on the floor on the train watching a video on my laptop, and that was I think one of the things I would accredit most to me progressing quite quickly through my career was I did a load of stuff outside of work. So I make my YouTube videos and stuff, and I was also just doing a lot of self-learning in terms of watching tutorials and shooting stuff myself and experimenting, because I didn't want to feel like a burden to people I was working with. Normally, when you have a junior, they kind of need quite a lot of hand holding, and that's totally fine. Everyone goes through that stage. But I wanted to get through that as quickly as I could so that I was a really strong and useful artist, and would be, trusted to do cooler shots and stuff as well, which is kind of the end goal. So that really was the main thing that I think is really important, is having the motivation and like putting in the spade work to do your own self development to progress in your ability. And what was the second part of the question? Sorry, I
So
babbled for too
that
long.
was, yeah, that no, no, that was a really good answer. But one of them was, the other question was any housekeeping. I guess it was, one was any advice, and then one was like kind of things
Pet
that people
peeves.
should be doing, essentially,
Okay. Um,
sort of like
I
housekeeping for the,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the self development as well is something you should
yeah.
definitely be doing, and it just really helps to progress faster and learn. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of all the stuff we've covered as well, like having good
Mm.
communication skills and things as well. Just coming across as someone that'll be really good to work with. That's something you can sort of work on in your spare time, and it's just like almost exposure therapy. The more you do it, the better you get. I got quite good at that because when I was working with the production company that I mentioned earlier, back home, I did a lot of interviews with MPs and important people that were locally, like chairmans of companies and things. And so I was the person that would like sit them down, put the microphone on them, and then stand behind the camera and ask them questions. So at the age of like 14, 15, I was conversing with people that were, relatively important. And that was a really fundamental point in my development in terms of maturing a bit and being able to have a conversation with these people and not, like looking away and not being able to make eye contact kind of thing.
Mm.
So all that stuff is incredibly important.
Yeah. We did have a question.
Oh, okay.
So it was a question saying, "How do people find you on YouTube? Tell us about your channel." Because I feel like
Oh, okay.
that was kind of a probably a pivotal time for you, where we sort of maybe saw your journey kind of like coming into your own in your profession.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange one. So I started off as a teenager, I was probably like 11 or 12, and off the back of watching channels like we were saying earlier, like Freddie Wong and Corridor and Film Riot, I would post my own short films. I would just like muck about in my garden with my family's video camera. I was really interested in Star Wars and still am, so I was making like lightsaber videos and things with sticks. It was very embarrassing, and none of it's still live on there because I'd be morbidly embarrassed if anyone saw them now. And I slowly got better at it, and then particularly when I went to college and I started studying games design, I learned how to use a 3D software. I got a bit better, and like the production value of the videos went up as my VFX skills improved. And then I really found my niche when I started working at the mill when I got the apprenticeship, because I was talking about techniques and demonstrating stuff in my videos that we were doing professionally at a visual effects studio. And that's not really, there's not many people on YouTube that work professionally and also show that kind of stuff that they do. So it was a real gap in the market that I found, where I was able to sort of convey information that a lot of people just wouldn't have access to unless they work at a studio. And obviously a lot of people consuming YouTube videos are amateurs and people looking to get into it. And then over the last few years, I kind of like come and gone with various different types and approaches to the content that I make. And now I've kind of landed on a lot of the stuff that I do is remaking like popular visual effects from films and TV shows. So I'll do like, I did an Iron Man video recently and a
Oh
Minecraft
wow.
video. I kind of time it whenever there's like a film coming out, like there's an upcoming Tron film in a couple of months. I'm planning to do something for that. I try and do like topical releases, remaking the visual effects from those films. And I'll do like a 30-second short film just showcasing it, and then spend 10, 15 minutes with like montages and screen recordings of how I've done it with a voiceover, and sort of breaking it down so that people that are interested in it can understand the process and get a bit of a look behind the scenes, I suppose. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And that's what I found a small amount of success with, I suppose, is making that kind of content. And it seems to be landing very well with people.
Nice. Well, honestly, I'm very happy for you. I want to
Thank
end
you.
on a note of, what's been your most favorite project to work on that's kind of spurred you on?
Oh man, there's so many. It's difficult. They're all like, apart from the last two things I've worked on, it's all kind of a blur now in the last few years. But I think the one that I always go back to is I did an advert for a game called Wizards Unite, which was a Harry Potter mobile game that came out probably
Oh,
4 or 5
nice.
years ago now. And to promote the game, Warner Brothers basically produced like a 6 minute short film, and it was a load of people running around with wands and casting spells. We had a load of CG creatures, so there were Dementors flying overhead, and there were Death Eaters and stuff, and people were teleporting. It was super cool, or apparating as it's called in the films. I'll get smacked by the Harry Potter fans if I get that wrong. And I was a massive Harry Potter fan growing up. I started reading Harry Potter books because, well, my parents could never get me to read anything, and then I fell in love with the books, and that was what got me into reading. I read all the books like 5 or 6 times each, probably before I even went to high school. And so, getting to work on like a proper Warner Brothers produced piece of live action Harry Potter content was incredible. I did like 6 weeks on that, I think. This must have been, yeah, 4 or 5 years ago, and I just had the time of my life. It was like that's why I got into visual effects, and that was one of the things I was really interested in. And getting to actually make those effects was a real dream come true.
Amazing. Honestly, honestly amazing. And I think that's like the perfect point to be like sort of start and end of that. And I think thank you so much, Alfie, for sharing your story and also
Oh,
your
thank you for having
insight
me. I really
and
appreciate it.
wisdom. No, honestly. And yeah, anyone who's interested in who's just joined and you're like, I just joined, I don't know what's happening. This will be on the Shiny Instagram, and it will also be on the platform as well. So you can see Alfie's interview in full, along with other interviews that we've done with people who are in the industry and that are doing the things that we want to do, and that can give us the insight. So thank you so much, Alfie, and take care.
No problem. You too. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.